All right, welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
We are tackling quite a topic today.
Well,
Really,
quite a story.
a huge story, and
Expansive.
it is huge. And we are lucky enough to have this one source,
Yeah.
which covers a massive amount of time.
It does. It's called 200 Years Together. Which it does. It covers.
That's kind of what
it covers 200 years.
Yeah, that's what it says on the tin, right?
It does.
200 years.
It really does.
So this is late 18th century.
All the way through
Soviet era.
into the modern day.
Yeah.
It's a really, really detailed account.
And for you, the listener, what we're going to try to do today is to really give you the most important, the biggest turning points and policies, and really show you how these two societies kind of interacted with each other without getting too bogged down in all the details.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's a lot of details.
A lot. And the thing is, 200 Years Together is not just like a history book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's based on historical documents, encyclopedic entries,
Right.
all sorts of stuff, like even personal accounts.
Wow.
So you're getting all these different layers.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got this massive landscape.
I think a good place to start would be with the late 18th century.
Okay.
Catherine the Great.
All right.
And, you know, the defining policy of her time,
Yeah.
as far as the Jewish population is concerned, is the establishment of the Pale of Settlement.
In 1791.
Right, in 1791.
Yeah.
So you see how this initial kind of like segregation is going to set the stage for centuries of a kind of a restricted
Absolutely.
life and fuel future tensions.
That's right. The Pale is essentially designated territories where Jews are allowed to live within the Russian Empire. And there were a lot of reasons for this. You know, I mean, there were definitely concerns about economic impacts of Jewish settlement in certain regions.
And there was a desire to direct Jewish settlement to particular areas, mainly White Russia.
Okay.
Which is Belarus today, and the new territories in the south, which were then called Yekaterinoslav and Taurida.
Right.
And what's interesting is that the Council of Her Majesty, they specifically said that they did not foresee any usefulness from Jews migrating to the already established Russian trading towns and harbors.
Interesting.
And they limited their official registration to White Russia.
Wow. So they really wanted to control where they were and weren't too keen on them being involved in these established trading centers.
Yeah. And even when they were temporarily allowed to enter Moscow, it was strictly for trade and not for permanent settlement.
Gotcha.
So you can really see how carefully their life was.
Right. From the outset.
Controlled from the outset.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, this early period also reveals some challenging societal perceptions that existed at the time. The historian Hessen, drawing on accounts from that period, he points to the role of Jewish tavern managers and leaseholders in the economic lives of peasants in White Russia. And there were complaints that they, alongside Christian proprietors and leasers, contributed to the economic vulnerability of the rural population.
So it's important to note here that he's not saying that it's just the Jews.
That's right.
He's saying that they were participating in this economic system along with Christians.
That's right.
And notably priests.
Right.
So this economic vulnerability was wider than just the Jewish population.
Yeah, these accounts were often very harsh in their descriptions.
Yeah.
And they were influenced by what was called the Kalida tradition, which was a period of winter celebrations where there was a lot of drinking and, you know, I guess merriment. And so these accounts describe Jews allegedly exploiting intoxicated farmers, pushing them into debt.
Oh, wow.
And seizing essential goods needed for survival.
Yeah.
So it paints
this harsh
picture of these early interactions.
Okay, so we can see how this early period is already setting the stage for a complex and often strained relationship between the Jewish population and
the larger society.
Yeah, and the larger society.
And the Russian Empire.
So now let's fast forward a little bit
Okay.
to the early 19th century,
Okay.
the reign of Aleksandr Isaac.
Quiet.
We start to see some shifts
Okay.
in policy and ideology.
Okay.
So there's this guy, Prince Golitsyn.
Okay.
He was a close friend of Alexander Isaac.
Okay.
And he was the minister who was over all Jewish affairs.
Okay.
He seemed to be very supportive of Jewish settlers.
Okay.
He would make decisions to grant them exemptions from royalty payments.
Right.
Temporarily, he would postpone full loan repayments.
Okay.
The source even indicates that the authorities in St. Petersburg were generally responsive to requests that came from the Jewish community in this period.
No, what's really interesting here is that there was a petition from Jewish settlers themselves that this historian, Nikitin, found very revealing. In it, they articulate a clear preference for engaging in commerce rather than agriculture. They seem to have viewed farming as a less prestigious occupation.
Right, less desirable.
More suitable for those lacking the talent and the education needed for what they considered the more
serious professions.
So you've got these Jewish settlers who are saying, you know, we'd rather be industrialists and merchants. We prefer commerce over agriculture. Do we know why?
I mean, that's really fascinating. Why would they see agriculture as this less esteemed profession?
Well, I mean, I think there are a couple things. I think one is their historical experience. Right? And maybe a lack of, you know, specific skills and resources for large-scale agriculture in this new context. But they also specifically say that they desire to return to bourgeois status. And with the freedom to travel and engage in trade, which, of course, had been restricted when they were
pushed toward agriculture.
Directed toward agricultural settlements. So it's really a fascinating insight into their aspirations and how they saw themselves.
And their capabilities at the time.
Now, their agricultural endeavors between 1814 and 1823, they didn't exactly lead to widespread success. The statistics from that period, they show relatively low levels of land cultivation per registered individual.
Oh, wow.
So many of them actually returned to commerce and other established trades. Now, Alexander I, he's often characterized as having inconsistent policies. But our source is very careful to point out that his decisions regarding the Jewish population should not be interpreted as stemming from a lack of respect. For example, he engaged with Jewish delegates, Aleksandr Sonnenberg, who apparently enjoyed a close friendship with the Tsar for a period of time. Although there were later difficulties with another delegate named Aleksandr. But still...
So there's this engagement happening.
Exactly. And even the establishment of a permanent Jewish deputation in St. Petersburg, which was financed by the Jewish community itself. This deputation presented demands to the authorities, including the right to participate in trade, farming, and even the distillation of spirits throughout Russia.
So they're really...
wanted everything.
they're really trying to push for integration and equal rights here.
Now, it wasn't all positive developments during this time. The source points to internal dynamics and challenges within the Jewish communities themselves. The policies of the Kihalim, which were the Jewish communal self-governing bodies, particularly those policies encouraging early marriages, and the resulting high population density within the Pale. These are cited as contributing factors to the worsening material conditions for many Jews.
So they're facing these challenges within the community itself.
Absolutely. Now, we also have Menashe Ilir, who is a distinguished Talmudic scholar, who also embraced ideals of the Enlightenment. Writing in 1807, he provides a critical perspective on what he called dark aspects of Jewish life. And so
the fact that there's poverty within the Jewish community is giving rise to these critical voices from within, such as Menashe Ilir.
And he points out this widespread poverty. And he said that it's a result of a situation where there are
more mouths than hands.
More mouths to feed than hands to work. And he also criticizes the reliance on what he called dishonest commerce as a means of survival. So out of necessity.
Out of necessity, Now, Ilir was a strong proponent of Jews turning to agriculture as a potential solution
to
these economic hardships. But he also criticizes internal communal issues and what he saw as an excessive focus on governmental decrees rather than prioritizing internal improvements within the Jewish community.
Self-reliance.
Self-reliance.
Okay.
And now as we move into the mid-19th century and the reign of Nicholas SF,
we encounter a truly significant development.
Right.
That is the introduction of compulsory military service for Jewish men.
Okay.
Now,
this is big.
This was met with resistance in Jewish communities, and its implementation was slow and often contentious.
Yeah.
Even the Council of Ministers, they debated the ethical defensibility of this measure, with some questioning whether it was even appropriate to conscript individuals as a way to limit what the Minister of Finance reportedly called Jewish overcrowding.
So they're basically saying, we need to get rid of some of the Jews.
That's right.
That's what they're saying.
That's exactly what they're saying.
Wow.
And the Kehalim, they were not passive in their opposition.
Right.
They actively sought to have the conscription decree
rescinded or
postponed.
Okay.
And there's even an account describing how they allegedly managed to delay the presentation of a final report on this matter to Nicholas I.
So they're playing the bureaucracy a little bit.
They were maneuvering within the administration.
Interesting.
However, ultimately, Nicholas I did issue a decree on military service for Jews in 1827.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly, by 1836, Jewish soldiers who distinguished themselves in service were granted equal rights with their non-Jewish counterparts.
Okay.
In terms of receiving medals and decorations.
So that's
something.
That's something.
Yeah.
So they're trying to, I guess, make it a little bit more palatable for the Jewish community.
Right. If you serve, you know, we'll treat you the same.
You can be rewarded the same way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, the Kehalim's attempts to influence the conscription process, these really illuminate their internal power dynamics within the Jewish community. They even petitioned the provincial authorities, although this request was denied, for the right to essentially select individuals deemed tramps and troublemakers for recruitment.
Interesting.
Ostensibly to protect the family member of tax-paying property owners.
Interesting. So it's like they're trying to get rid of the people that they don't want in their own community.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right. This really shows the internal stratification, and the ways they try to manage this burden.
Yeah, it shows that they had some power within the community.
Right.
They could choose who to send off.
Yeah, and how they tried to, you know,
protect their own.
Yeah, protect their own.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
Now, despite these measures and the Kehalim's efforts, draft evasion was a problem, and full recruitment quotas were rarely met. Jewish communities also face the burden of cash taxation. And the process of refunding overpaid arrears was often incomplete and unreliable. Now, in a sort of paradoxical turn of events, Nicholas I granted a request from the city of Grodno for additional Jewish recruits to cover outstanding tax arrears.
Interesting.
And a Senate decree in 1830 explicitly linked the provision of these additional recruits to a reduction of the Kahal's debt.
So if they give more recruits, they have less debt.
That's right. Eventually, the government, despite initial concerns about potential manipulation by the Kehalim, they appeared to welcome the idea of Jewish communities enlisting recruits as a way to resolve their financial obligations to the state. Now, reflecting on this increased stringency in Jewish recruitment, Hessen considered it a glaring anomaly within the framework of Russian law. And he pointed out that more broadly, legislation concerning Jews in Russia typically didn't impose greater obligations than those faced by other citizens. So this military service decree really stood out.
As an exception.
Okay.
So we've seen this initial period of limitations, strict limitations under the Pale, followed by some tentative steps towards integration, often met with resistance and internal divisions.
Absolutely.
But we haven't actually talked about the Pale itself yet.
That's right.
I think it's time.
That's right. And it's important to do so because, we think about the Pale
as this tiny little area.
Right. It's often conceptualized as this very confined and small area.
Yeah.
But the source really stresses its vast geographical extent.
It was huge.
It was massive. 15 provinces compared to 31 for what was considered Deep Russia.
Wow. And a lot of those central Russian provinces were more densely populated overall than the Pale was.
And so the density of Jews in the Pale wasn't simply
sheer numbers.
A matter of sheer population number.
Yeah.
It encompassed the territories inherited from the Polish partitions,
right,
which already had a substantial Jewish population, but also considerable provinces like Vilnius, Grodno, Kaunas, the expansive southern regions, even Astrakhan and parts of the Caucasus were included within its boundaries for a time.
Okay.
Although Jewish settlement there remained low.
Right.
So you have 15 provinces versus 31 for Deep Russia.
Yeah. And so what's the point here?
The point is that the perceived density of Jews in the Pale, it wasn't just a question of numbers.
Of sheer numbers.
It stemmed more from the uniformity of their occupations, their concentration in specific trades and professions.
That's interesting.
Led to the sense of overcrowding and economic pressure.
Right.
Even if their overall percentage of the empire's population was not necessarily higher than other minorities residing in different regions.
So it's all about perception.
Yes.
It's all about the fact that they're all doing the same things
in
the same area.
And this perception is going to lead to further problems down the road.
Absolutely.
Now, the mid-19th century also witnessed some notable failures in terms of government policy concerning the Jewish population.
Okay.
There was an attempt in 1844 to implement a policy of expelling Jews from villages, which ultimately proved to be unsuccessful and impractical.
Okay.
Hessen has this great quote from this period.
Yeah.
He says that the government was
struggling.
Yeah, they were struggling to extirpate the existence of the Jew from the depths of Russian life.
Wow. So they're really trying hard.
They really are.
To get rid of them or to change them somehow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it seems that they are realizing
what they call
the unassimilability of the large Jewish population that they acquired from Poland.
Right.
And it was very difficult for them.
Yeah, to figure out what to do. Yeah.
Now, this brings us to Alexander II.
Okay.
And an initial period of hesitation when it came to equal rights for Jews.
So,
In 1858, Governor General Stroganov of Novorossiysk suggested the immediate and complete equalization of Jewish rights.
Bold move.
Very bold move. But this proposal met resistance from the committee. That was established under Bludov.
Right.
They voiced concerns about Jewish prejudices and fanaticism.
So already we're seeing this.
Yeah, right. And they drew unfavorable comparisons between Russian Jews and their counterparts in Western Europe. Particularly in regard to their levels of assimilation through education.
Right.
And their adoption of what were considered useful occupations.
As defined by the state.
So
assimilation often meant for them.
Right.
Not only, adopting the Russian language and culture.
Right.
But abandoning distinct Jewish communal life and tradition.
Yes.
Which is obviously
a point of tension.
A huge point of tension.
Yes. Yeah. Now, the committee's viewpoint was that any move towards equalization
should be
gradual.
Okay.
And it would be contingent upon the spread of true enlightenment among the Jewish population. Significant changes in their internal communal life. And a shift toward economic activities that were considered more beneficial
to the state. Right. So again, it's all about control.
Yes.
Right.
Now, after Alexander II's initial reforms, the question of the Pale of Settlement became a very pressing issue, and it was actively debated. The Jewish intelligentsia in particular began to hope for its abolition in light of these changes. But what's interesting is that within Jewish society, there emerged a concept of selectivity when it came to the extension of rights.
Interesting.
Right? This idea that perhaps privileges and greater freedoms should be granted based on certain criteria.
Such
as like
productivity.
Productivity, okay. Or the degree of assimilation.
Assimilation, so this meritocratic?
Yeah, a meritocratic approach.
Interesting.
This is very clearly reflected in the 1856 petition submitted by a group of Jewish merchants, citizens of St. Petersburg, and out-of-towners. They were individuals who had closer connections to the central authorities. Their petition specifically requested that privileges should not be extended to the entire Jewish population, but only to certain categories. So members of the younger generation who had been educated under government supervision in Russian schools, the established upper merchant class, and industrious craftsmen, they asked the Tsar to differentiate these groups from those who had not yet demonstrated a good intentions, economic usefulness, and industriousness.
So it's like they're trying to say, hey, look
at us.
We're the good ones.
Yeah, we're the good ones.
Right. We deserve these rights.
Yeah.
And those other guys over there, not so much.
Not so much, yeah. They wanted this meritocratic approach.
Yeah.
But even these petitioners did not anticipate the speed of the
changes that were about to happen.
That were about to unfold. We then see some relaxations of restrictions under Alexander II.
Alexander II.
So, for instance, Minister Makov issued a decree allowing Jews who had already settled illegally outside the pale
to join there.
Legally, Jewish lawyers actually found it fairly straightforward to share government positions during the 1860s. This was largely because there wasn't a formal bar college at the time. Restrictions in the border regions.
Host speaker.